The dust had barely settled on Stella Whitmore's worn traveling boots when the snickering started behind the general store counter in Williamsburg, Virginia. And she knew with a sinking certainty that this town would be no different from all the others. It was the spring of 1876, and she had traveled alone from her native Boston after her father's shipping business collapsed, leaving her orphaned and penniless at 22 years old. The proprietor, a thin-lipped woman with gray streaks in her severe bun, had asked where she hailed from, and the moment Stella opened her mouth to answer, pronouncing her rounded vowels and dropped articulate in that distinctly Bostonian way, the woman's expression had curdled like spoiled milk. "We don't need any fancy northern girls here thinking they're better than honest folk," the woman said sharply, and several customers turned to stare. Stella felt her cheeks burn as she clutched her small carpetbag closer. She had come to Virginia hoping for a fresh start, responding to an advertisement for a schoolteacher in the local newspaper that had somehow made its way to Boston. The pay was modest, but it included room and board in a small cabin behind the schoolhouse, and most importantly, it was employment when she had none. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," Stella said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady despite the tremor she felt rising in her throat. "I've come about the teaching position." "Teaching position?" The woman barked out a laugh. "You think we're going to let you teach our children to talk like some highfalutin Yankee? The war's been over 11 years, but that doesn't mean we've forgotten." Stella had heard variations of this sentiment in the 3 other towns she had passed through on her way south. The Civil War had ended when she was only a child, but the wounds it left behind still festered in places like this. She had hoped Virginia, being somewhat more progressive than the deeper South, might be different. Apparently, she had been wrong. She purchased the few supplies she could afford with her dwindling coins and left the store with her head held high, though inside she felt like crumbling. As she walked down the dusty Main Street, she became acutely aware of the whispers that followed her, the way conversations stopped when she passed, the pointing and the barely concealed contempt. By the time she reached the small boarding house where she had reserved a room for the night, she was fighting back tears. The boarding house keeper, a portly man with suspicious eyes, took her money but made it clear she was not welcome to stay beyond the single night she had paid for. "We don't cater to your kind," he said flatly, and Stella did not bother asking what he meant. She already knew. That evening she sat in the cramped room with its peeling wallpaper and tried to formulate a plan. She had just enough money for perhaps 2 more weeks if she was extremely careful. The interview with the school board was scheduled for tomorrow morning, and she had to make it work. She had nowhere else to go, no family to return to, no safety net waiting to catch her fall. This had to succeed. She practiced speaking in the mirror, trying to flatten her vowels, trying to sound less like herself. But every attempt felt like betraying the memory of her father, who had been so proud of their heritage, of the cultured way they spoke, of the education he had scraped together the money to give her. He had believed that proper diction and grammar were signs of refinement and intelligence, and he had made sure Stella received the best tutoring available, even when it meant going without other luxuries. Sleep came fitfully that night, and she woke before dawn with a knot of anxiety in her stomach. She dressed carefully in her best dress, a simple but well-made navy blue garment that her father had commissioned for her 21st birthday. It was starting to show signs of wear now, but it was still respectable. She pinned her dark blonde hair into a neat bun and looked at her reflection one final time, steeling herself for what was to come. The school board meeting was held in a cramped office above the town hall. 5 men sat behind a long table, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. Stella introduced herself, and tried to present her qualifications with confidence, speaking about her education, her love of literature and mathematics, her experience helping her father with bookkeeping, which had given her a head for numbers. But she could see it in their faces before they even spoke. The moment she opened her mouth, the moment her accent became clear, she had lost them. "Miss Whitmore," the eldest of the men said, his tone patronizing, "while your credentials are impressive on paper, we feel that you would not be a suitable fit for our community. Our children need someone who understands Virginia values, Virginia traditions. Someone who sounds like home, not like a foreign country." "Boston is not a foreign country," Stella said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "It's part of the same nation." "That's debatable," another man muttered, and several others chuckled. Stella left the meeting with her dignity intact, but her hopes shattered. She walked aimlessly through town, not knowing where to go or what to do next. She found herself on the outskirts of Williamsburg, where the buildings gave way to open fields and scattered farms. The Virginia countryside was beautiful in a way that was different from Boston. All rolling hills and red clay and the promise of a warm summer ahead. She sat down on a fallen log near a split-rail fence and finally allowed herself to cry. The tears came hot and angry, tears of frustration and fear and loneliness. She had been so brave for so long, had held herself together through her father's death, through the loss of their home, through the long journey south. But she had reached the end of her strength, and she did not know how to go on. "Begging your pardon, miss, but are you all right?" The voice startled her, and she looked up quickly, wiping at her eyes. A man stood a few feet away, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly beneath the brim of his worn cowboy hat. He wore dusty work clothes and had the weathered look of someone who spent his days outdoors. His eyes, a striking shade of gray-blue, held genuine concern. "I'm fine," Stella said automatically, then realized how ridiculous that must sound given that he had just found her sobbing beside a fence. "That is, I will be fine. I apologize for disturbing you." "You didn't disturb me none," he said, and she noticed he had a soft Virginia drawl, the kind that turned words into something almost melodic. "I was just heading back to my ranch when I saw you sitting here looking upset. Wanted to make sure you weren't hurt or in trouble." "I'm not hurt," Stella said. "Not physically, anyway." He shifted his weight, looking uncertain. "Would it help to talk about it? I know we're strangers, but sometimes that makes it easier." Stella found herself wanting to talk, wanting to pour out the whole miserable story to this kind-faced stranger. But she hesitated, knowing what would happen the moment she spoke more than a few words. He would hear her accent, and the concern in his eyes would turn to the same cold dismissal she had encountered everywhere else. "You don't want to hear about my problems," she said quietly. "Wouldn't have asked if I didn't," he replied. He gestured to the log beside her. "Mind if I sit?" She shook her head, and he settled himself on the log, keeping a respectful distance. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 26 or 27, with strong features and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. There was something steady about him, something solid and trustworthy that made her want to trust him despite her better judgment. "I came here looking for work," Stella began slowly. "I answered an advertisement for a teaching position, but the school board rejected me." "Why would they do that?" he asked, sounding genuinely puzzled. "You seem like you'd make a fine teacher." "You can tell that from a 2-minute conversation. I can tell you're educated and well-spoken," he said. "And you've got kind eyes. That matters when you're teaching children." Stella felt a fresh wave of emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "They rejected me because of how I speak. Because I'm from Boston and I have a northern accent, and apparently that makes me unsuitable to teach Virginia children." She watched his face carefully as she spoke, waiting for the change, for the walls to go up. But his expression remained open, concerned. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard," he said flatly. "Begging your pardon for the language, but it is. What does where you're from have to do with whether you can teach reading and arithmetic?" "Apparently everything," Stella said bitterly. "I've tried 3 other towns before this one. It's always the same. People hear me talk, and they decide I'm some sort of arrogant Yankee who thinks I'm better than them. I've been mocked, turned away, told to go back where I came from. And I would go back if I had anywhere to go to, but I don't. My father died 6 months ago, and everything we had was lost. This teaching position was my last hope." Her voice broke on the last words, and she looked down at her hands, twisted together in her lap. She felt the cowboy shift beside her, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentle. "I'm sorry about your father. That must have been awful hard." "Thank you," she whispered. "And I'm sorry about how folks have treated you here. It's not right." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "For what it's worth, I think your voice is the most beautiful sound I know." Stella's head snapped up, sure she had misheard him. "What?" He looked a bit embarrassed now, color rising in his tan cheeks. "Your accent, I mean, the way you talk. It's different from what I'm used to, but it's not bad different. It's like music almost. Refined and pretty. First time I heard it, I thought it was the loveliest thing." She stared at him, completely taken aback. In all her travels, through all the mockery and rejection, not one person had said anything like that to her. Most people acted as though her accent was something offensive, something that grated on their ears. But this stranger, this cowboy, said it was beautiful. "You're making fun of me," she said uncertainly. "I'm not," he said seriously, meeting her eyes. "I swear I'm not. I mean every word." They looked at each other for a long moment, and Stella felt something shift in her chest, a tiny crack in the wall of hurt and anger she had built around herself. This man, whoever he was, seemed to mean what he said. There was no mockery in his eyes, no hidden agenda, just honest sincerity. "I don't even know your name," she said softly. "Vincent Rourke," he said, offering his hand. "Most folks call me Vince. I run a cattle ranch about 3 miles west of here." She shook his hand, noting the strength in his grip and the roughness of his palm. "Stella Whitmore." "Most folks call me a nuisance." He smiled at that, a slow, warm smile that reached his eyes. "I can't imagine anyone calling you that in truth." "Then you haven't been to the general store or the boarding house or the town hall," Stella said, but she found herself smiling back despite everything. They sat together as the sun climbed higher in the sky, and Stella found herself talking more freely than she had in months. Vincent listened with genuine interest as she told him about her life in Boston, about her father's business, about her education and her love of books. He asked questions that showed he was really paying attention, not just waiting for his turn to speak. In turn, he told her about his ranch, which he had built up from almost nothing over the past 5 years. He had worked as a ranch hand for various outfits before managing to save enough to buy his own land and a small herd. It was hard work, he admitted, often lonely work, but it was his and he was proud of it. "You have any family?" Stella asked. "Not anymore," Vincent said. "My parents died of fever when I was 16. Had a sister, but she married a man from Richmond and moved there about 3 years back. We write sometimes, but I don't see her much." "So we're both alone," Stella said quietly. "I guess we are," Vincent agreed. "Though maybe a little less alone now than we were this morning." The statement hung in the air between them, full of possibility. Stella felt her heart beating faster, felt a flutter of something she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope, perhaps. Or the beginning of something more complicated. "I should probably get back to town," she said reluctantly. "I need to figure out what to do next, where to go." You don't have to leave right away, do you? Vincent asked. I mean, you've got your room for tonight at least, right? I do, but I can't afford to stay beyond that, and there's clearly no work for me here. Vincent was quiet for a moment, and she could see him thinking something over, working through some internal debate. Finally, he spoke, the words coming out in a rush as though he was afraid he would lose his nerve if he did not say them quickly. I have a proposition for you, and I want you to know it's completely respectable and proper. But if you need work and a place to stay, I could use help at the ranch. Stella's eyes widened. Help? What kind of help? Cooking, mostly, Vincent said. I'm a terrible cook, and I'm tired of eating burned beans and charred meat. And there's mending and cleaning, and I've been meaning to fix up the spare room, but I never seem to have time. It's not teaching, I know, but it's honest work, and I'd pay you a fair wage, plus room and board. You want to hire me as a housekeeper? Stella tried to understand what he was offering. I want to hire you as help, Vincent said. And before you worry about propriety, I want you to know that the ranch is set up with the main house and a separate small cabin about 50 yards away. The previous owner built it for his mother-in-law. You'd have your own space, your own privacy. This isn't me trying to take advantage. This is just me offering work to someone who needs it, and I genuinely do need the help. Stella studied his face, trying to determine if this was some sort of trick or trap. But Vincent met her gaze steadily, and she saw nothing but sincerity there. He was offering her a lifeline, a way to survive until she could figure out her next step. And more than that, he was offering her kindness after so much cruelty. Why would you do this for a complete stranger? She asked. Because I know what it's like to be alone and desperate, Vincent said simply. And because you seem like a good person who's had some bad luck. And honestly, because I like talking to you, and I wouldn't mind having someone around to talk to now and then. What will people in town say? Stella asked. If they already don't like me and then they find out I'm working at your ranch, let them say what they want, Vincent said with a shrug. I don't much care what most of them think. I do my business honestly, I pay my debts, and what I do on my own property is my own affair. Stella took a deep breath, weighing her options. She could refuse his offer and try to move on to another town, with almost no money and no guarantee that the next place would be any better than this one. Or she could accept this unexpected kindness and give herself time to figure out a real plan. When she looked at it that way, the choice seemed obvious. All right, she said. I'll take the job, but I want to be clear that I'll work hard and earn my keep. I'm not looking for charity. I wouldn't offer charity, Vincent said. I'm looking for an employee, and I think you'll be a good one. They shook hands on it, and Stella felt that flutter of hope grow stronger in her chest. Maybe her luck was finally changing. Maybe Virginia would not be so bad after all. Vincent helped her gather her few belongings from the boarding house, enduring the suspicious looks from the keeper with patient indifference. Then he led her to where his horse was tied outside the general store. It was a sturdy roan gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. His name is Rusty, Vincent said, patting the horse's neck affectionately. He's a good boy, aren't you, fella? Since Stella had no horse of her own, Vincent helped her up onto Rusty's back and then swung up behind her. She was acutely aware of his presence, of his arm steadying her as they rode, of the warmth of him at her back. It had been a long time since she had been this close to anyone, and it made her feel both nervous and comforted at the same time. The ride to the ranch took about 40 minutes, following a well-worn trail through increasingly rural countryside. As they rode, Vincent pointed out various landmarks and neighboring properties, keeping up a steady stream of conversation that helped ease Stella's nervousness. He had an easy way about him, she noticed, a natural kindness that seemed as much a part of him as his gray-blue eyes or his Virginia drawl. The ranch, when they finally reached it, was more impressive than Stella had expected. The main house was a solid two-story structure built of wood and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and one side. It was not fancy, but it was well maintained and clearly built to last. Behind it stood a large barn, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals. In the distance, she could see cattle grazing in fenced pastures. "It's wonderful," Stella said sincerely as Vincent helped her down from the horse. "It's home," Vincent said with obvious pride. "Come on, I'll show you the cabin first so you can settle in." The cabin was indeed separate from the main house, a small but charming structure with one main room that served as both bedroom and sitting area, plus a smaller attached room that held a washstand and other necessities. It was simply furnished but clean, with a real bed, a small table and chair, a wardrobe, and even a rocking chair by the window. The window itself looked out over a pretty view of the pastures and the mountains beyond. "It's perfect," Stella said, setting down her carpetbag. "Truly." "I'm glad you like it," Vincent said. "You take some time to settle in and rest if you need to. I've got some work to finish up in the barn, but come up to the main house whenever you're ready and I'll show you around." After he left, Stella stood in the middle of her new home and felt tears pricking at her eyes again. But these were different tears than the ones she had cried that morning. These were tears of relief and gratitude. Just a few hours ago, she had been at rock bottom, seeing no way forward. And now she had a job, a place to live, and perhaps most surprisingly, the beginning of what might become a friendship with a kind and decent man. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her hairbrush, her father's pocket watch, and her small collection of books on the table. The books had been the hardest things to carry on her journey, but she had refused to leave them behind. They were her most precious possessions, a connection to her old life and her father's love of learning. After washing her face and tidying her hair, Stella made her way to the main house. Vincent met her at the door and gave her a tour, showing her the kitchen with its large cast-iron stove, the dining room with its handmade table, the sitting room with its comfortable furniture and stone fireplace. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms, though Vincent clearly only used one. "My parents always wanted a big family," Vincent explained. "Built this place with that in mind, but then they died before any of us kids had children of our own." The kitchen, Stella had to admit, showed signs of bachelor living. The stove was clean enough, but the shelves were disorganized, and the pantry was stocked with basic supplies but nothing that suggested any real cooking skill. Vincent noticed her looking and gave a sheepish grin. "I told you I was a terrible cook," he said. "I can make coffee that won't kill you and beans that are usually only half burned. Beyond that, I'm useless." "Well, that's what I'm here for," Stella said. "When would you like me to start? How about tomorrow morning?" Vincent suggested. "You've had a long day. Why don't you rest this evening and we'll start fresh tomorrow?" But Stella found she did not want to rest. She wanted to work, to prove her worth, to begin repaying the kindness Vincent had shown her. "If you don't mind, I'd rather start now. I could make dinner for us both if you'd like." Vincent looked pleased. "I'd like that very much." Stella rolled up her sleeves and set to work, exploring the pantry and cellar to see what ingredients were available. She found flour, salt, sugar, lard, potatoes, onions, and a slab of bacon. In the cellar, there were jars of preserved vegetables from the previous year. It was not much to work with, but it was enough. She made biscuits from scratch, fried thick slices of bacon until they were perfectly crispy, boiled potatoes and mashed them with butter and milk, and warmed some of the preserved green beans. It was simple fare, but it was well prepared and far better than anything Vincent had been eating on his own, When she called him in for dinner, his eyes widened at the sight of the table she had set. "This looks amazing," he said. "I can't remember the last time I had a real meal." They sat down together, and Stella found herself feeling oddly nervous. It was strange, sharing a meal with a man she had only met that morning. Strange, but not unpleasant. Vincent ate with obvious enjoyment, complimenting her cooking repeatedly and asking for seconds on the biscuits. As they ate, they talked more, falling into an easy conversation that felt natural despite their short acquaintance. Vincent told her stories about the ranch, about difficult cattle and ornery horses, about his neighbors and the characters who lived in and around Williamsburg. He made her laugh with his descriptions, and she realized with surprise that she felt more relaxed than she had in months. "Can I ask you something?" Vincent said as they were finishing their meal. "Why did you decide to come south?" "I imagine there were teaching positions in Boston or other northern cities." Stella was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I needed to get away," she said finally. "Boston was full of memories of my father, of our old life. Everywhere I looked, I saw what I had lost. And there were creditors, people my father had owed money to. They were understanding at first, but as time went on and I couldn't pay, they became less sympathetic. I thought if I could start fresh somewhere new, somewhere I had no history, I could build a new life." "But the war got in the way," Vincent said quietly. "The war's been over for 11 years, Stella said. "But yes, it got in the way. I knew there might be some resentment, but I didn't realize how deep it ran. I thought surely people would judge me on my character, not on where I was born." "People can be small-minded," Vincent said, "especially in small towns where they don't get much exposure to outsiders. They get set in their ways and suspicious of anything different." "You're not like that," Stella observed. "My parents raised me to judge folks by their actions, not by things they can't control," Vincent said. "And I've traveled enough to know that good people and bad people come from all over. Geography doesn't determine character." "I wish more people thought like you do," Stella said softly. "Give them time," Vincent said. "Once they get to know you, they'll come around. You'll see." Stella was not so sure about that, but she appreciated his optimism. After dinner, she insisted on cleaning up despite Vincent's protests that she had done enough for one day. He helped her anyway, drying dishes as she washed them, and they continued talking as they worked. By the time Stella finally made her way back to her cabin, the sun was setting in brilliant shades of orange and pink. She stood on her small porch for a moment, watching the sky change colors and listening to the evening sounds of the ranch. For the first time in a very long time, she felt something like peace. The next several weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Stella woke early each morning and went to the main house to prepare breakfast for herself and Vincent. After they ate, Vincent would head out to work on the ranch while Stella tackled the domestic tasks. She cleaned the house thoroughly, mended Vincent's worn work clothes, organized the pantry and cellar, and prepared substantial meals for lunch and dinner. But she also found time for other things. Vincent had a small library of books, nothing like the collection her father had owned, but still more than she expected. She borrowed them eagerly, reading in the evenings by lamplight in her cabin. And Vincent, discovering her love of learning, began bringing her newspapers from town whenever he went in for supplies, knowing she enjoyed keeping up with current events. They fell into a pattern of having dinner together each evening, and those meals became the highlight of Stella's day. Vincent was easy to talk to, with a quick wit and a genuine interest in her opinions. They discussed everything from politics to philosophy, from literature to farming techniques. Vincent might not have had formal education beyond basic schooling, but he was intelligent and thoughtful, and Stella found she valued his perspective. She also found herself noticing other things about him. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The gentle way he handled the horses and cattle. The sound of his laughter, which was deep and genuine. The way he always seemed to think of small kindnesses, like picking wildflowers and leaving them on her cabin doorstep, or fixing the loose board on her porch without being asked. Stella tried to tell herself she was just grateful to him for his help, that what she felt was simple friendship and appreciation. But she knew, deep down, that it was becoming something more. She was falling for Vincent Rourke, and that terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. Vincent, for his part, seemed to be drawn to her as well. She noticed the way he looked for excuses to linger after meals, the way he sometimes seemed flustered in her presence, the way his eyes followed her when he thought she was not looking. But he never said anything, never crossed the line of proper behavior, and Stella did not know if that was because he was being respectful or because he did not feel the same way she did. About a month after Stella arrived at the ranch, Vincent had to go into town for supplies and to conduct some business at the bank. He asked if Stella needed anything, and she gave him a short list of household items. He was gone most of the day, and when he returned in the late afternoon, his expression was troubled. "What's wrong?" Stella asked, meeting him as he pulled up in the wagon. "Nothing's wrong exactly," Vincent said, climbing down. "Just ran into some folks in town who had some things to say." "About me," Stella guessed. Vincent's jaw tightened. "About you working here. Seems some of the more small-minded individuals have been spreading gossip, suggesting that our arrangement is less than proper." Stella felt her stomach drop. She had known this might happen, but she had hoped that by keeping to the ranch and staying out of town, she might avoid it. "What did they say?" "Nothing worth repeating," Vincent said firmly. "And I told them in no uncertain terms that you were my employee, that our arrangement was completely respectable, and that they could mind their own business." "Did they listen?" "Some did. Some didn't. But Stella, I don't want you to worry about this. You haven't done anything wrong, and neither have I. Let people think what they want to think." But Stella did worry about it. She worried that the gossip would harm Vincent's reputation, that his kindness to her would end up hurting him. She said as much to him that evening over dinner. "If people are talking, maybe I should leave," she said quietly. "I don't want to cause problems for you." "You're not causing problems," Vincent said firmly. "The problem is people who have nothing better to do than gossip about things that are none of their concern. And I'll tell you something else, Stella. Even if you wanted to leave, I'd try to talk you out of it. These past few weeks, having you here, it's been really good. The ranch runs better, the food is better, but more than that, I'm happier. I look forward to coming in at the end of the day because I know you'll be here. I enjoy our conversations, your perspective on things. You've become important to me." Stella's heart was pounding. "Vincent, I feel the same way, but I don't want people to think poorly of you because of me." "I don't care what they think," Vincent said. "I care about what's true, and the truth is that you're one of the finest people I've ever met, and I count myself lucky that you're here." They looked at each other across the table, and Stella felt the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. She wanted to tell him that she was falling in love with him, that she thought about him constantly, that the sound of his voice had indeed become the most beautiful thing she knew, just as he had once said hers was to him. But she was afraid of ruining the friendship they had built, afraid of being vulnerable only to be hurt. "Stella," Vincent said softly, and there was something in his voice that made her breath catch. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course," she whispered. "That first day I met you, when I found you crying by the fence, I felt something. I didn't understand it at first, but the more time I spend with you, the more I realize what it is." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I'm falling in love with you. I might have already fallen. And I know it's fast, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I needed you to know." Stella felt tears spring to her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. "I feel the same way," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I've been falling in love with you too. I tried not to because I thought you couldn't possibly feel the same way, that you were just being kind because that's who you are. But Vincent, you're everything I never knew I wanted. You're kind and strong and thoughtful. You see me, the real me, not just my accent or where I'm from. You make me feel valued and safe and understood." Vincent stood up from the table, and Stella did the same. They moved toward each other, meeting in the middle of the kitchen. Vincent reached out and gently cupped her face in his calloused hands, looking down at her with such tenderness that it made her heart ache. "Can I kiss you?" he asked softly. "Please," she breathed. He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, and it was everything a first kiss should be. Gentle and sweet and full of promise. Stella's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," Vincent admitted. "So have I," Stella said. They spent the rest of the evening on the porch, sitting close together on the bench Vincent had built, watching the stars come out and talking about the future. Vincent wanted to court her properly, wanted to give her time to be sure of her feelings. Stella appreciated that, even though she was already sure. She knew what she felt for Vincent was real and deep and lasting. Over the following months, their relationship deepened and grew. Vincent courted Stella with old-fashioned dedication, bringing her small gifts, taking her on walks around the ranch, showing her all his favorite spots. He taught her to ride on a gentle mare named Daisy, and she delighted in the freedom of galloping across the open fields with the wind in her hair. They went into town together sometimes, and while there were still people who looked at Stella with disdain, there were also some who began to warm to her. The doctor's wife, a kind woman named Martha, made a point of speaking pleasantly to Stella. The blacksmith, a gruff man named Tom, tipped his hat to her. Slowly, a few people at a time, some of the townspeople began to see past Stella's accent to the person she actually was. It helped that Stella made genuine efforts to be friendly and helpful. When Martha's daughter fell ill, Stella sent over a basket of food and offered to help with anything that was needed. When the church needed volunteers to clean and prepare for a social, Stella showed up with her sleeves rolled up, ready to work. She did not try to change who she was or hide her accent, but she showed through her actions that she was a good person who wanted to be part of the community. Vincent was proud of her efforts, though he told her she did not need to prove herself to anyone. But Stella knew that for her own sake, she needed to try. She did not want to live isolated on the ranch forever. She wanted to be part of something larger, to have friends and connections. By the time autumn arrived, painting the Virginia landscape in shades of red and gold, Stella had been at the ranch for 7 months. She and Vincent had settled into a relationship that felt both passionate and comfortable, the kind of love that was based on genuine friendship as well as romantic attraction. They had not yet discussed marriage, but Stella sensed it was coming. Vincent had a way of looking at her sometimes, with such love and intention, that she knew he was thinking about their future together. The proposal came on a crisp October evening. Vincent had asked Stella to take a walk with him after dinner, leading her to a spot on the edge of the ranch property where a large oak tree stood overlooking a valley. The sunset was spectacular, the sky ablaze with color. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," Vincent said as they stood together beneath the tree. "I come here when I need to think, or when I need to feel close to something bigger than myself." "It's beautiful," Stella said, leaning against him. "Stella, I want to ask you something important," Vincent said, and she could hear the nervousness in his voice. "These past 7 months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought joy and laughter and love into my world, and I can't imagine going back to how things were before you arrived. I know we haven't known each other that long, but I know my heart. I know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you'll have me." He pulled back slightly and reached into his pocket, drawing out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a simple but beautiful gold band with a small sapphire set in it. "Stella Whitmore, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my love for all the years we have left?" Stella felt tears streaming down her face, tears of overwhelming happiness. "Yes," she said fervently. "Yes, Vincent, I'll marry you. Nothing would make me happier." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was kissing her, holding her close as the sun set behind them and the first stars began to appear. When they finally pulled apart, both of them laughing and crying at the same time, Stella looked down at the ring on her hand and felt a sense of rightness, of coming home, that she had not felt since before her father died. They decided to have a simple wedding in the spring, giving people time to get used to the idea and to plan properly. Vincent's sister Margaret came down from Richmond to meet Stella and to help with preparations. Margaret was a warm, outgoing woman who immediately took to Stella, telling her that she had never seen her brother so happy. "He was always a bit lonely, I think," Margaret confided one afternoon as she and Stella worked on Stella's wedding dress. "Even before our parents died, he was the serious one, the responsible one. He carried so much on his shoulders, but with you he laughs more. He's lighter. You're good for him." "He's good for me too," Stella said. "He saved me in a way. Not just by giving me a job when I needed one, but by seeing me for who I really am. By making me feel valued and loved." The wedding took place on a warm May morning in 1877, just over a year after Stella had first arrived in Williamsburg. They held the ceremony in the small church in town, with the minister officiating and a modest gathering of guests in attendance. Margaret stood up as Stella's matron of honor, and Vincent's closest friend, a neighboring rancher named Charlie, served as his best man. Stella wore a simple white dress that she and Margaret had sewn together, with lace trim and pearl buttons. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Vincent had picked for her that morning. As she walked down the aisle toward Vincent, who stood waiting for her with such love in his eyes, she felt like the luckiest woman alive. Not everyone in town approved of the match. There were still some who whispered that Vincent was making a mistake marrying a northern girl. But there were far more who had come to respect and even like Stella over the past year, and they came to the wedding to show their support. Martha was there, beaming. Tom the blacksmith was there with his wife. Even the school board president, who had once rejected Stella so coldly, had softened enough to attend. The ceremony itself was beautiful in its simplicity. Vincent's voice was steady as he recited his vows, promising to love and cherish Stella for all his days. Stella's voice, with its distinctive Boston accent that Vincent loved so much, was equally firm as she made her own promises. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and told Vincent he could kiss his bride, the kiss they shared was met with applause and cheers from the assembled guests. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food provided by various neighbors and friends. There was music and dancing, and Stella found herself whirled around the makeshift dance floor by Vincent, by Charlie, by Tom the blacksmith, and by various other men who wanted to welcome her properly into the community. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and by the time the last guests departed in the early evening, Stella was tired but happier than she had ever been. That night, as Stella moved her few belongings from the cabin to the main house, To the room she would now share with Vincent, she thought about how much her life had changed in just over a year. She had gone from being alone and desperate to being loved and cherished. She had found not just a home but a partner, not just a job but a purpose. The first years of their marriage were filled with hard work and deep contentment. Vincent expanded the ranch, buying more land and increasing the herd. Stella managed the household and also began teaching reading and mathematics to the children of neighboring ranchers who were too far from town for regular schooling. It was not the formal teaching position she had once sought, but it was fulfilling in its own way. She and Vincent grew closer with each passing month, learning each other's rhythms and habits, building a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. They worked together during the day and fell asleep in each other's arms at night. They argued sometimes, as all couples do, but they always talked through their disagreements with honesty and care. In the spring of 1878, Stella discovered she was pregnant. Vincent was over the moon with joy, treating Stella like she was made of glass despite her protests that she was perfectly capable of continuing her normal activities. As her belly grew through the summer and into the fall, Vincent spent his evenings talking to the baby, telling stories and singing songs in his soft Virginia drawl. Their son was born on a cold December morning, delivered with the help of Martha and the town doctor. It was a difficult labor, and there were moments when Stella was frightened, but Vincent held her hand through it all, offering encouragement and love. When the baby finally arrived, screaming lustily to announce his presence, both parents cried with relief and joy. They named him Samuel, after Stella's father. He was a healthy, beautiful baby with Vincent's gray-blue eyes and Stella's blonde hair. Vincent was a devoted father from the first moment, marveling at Samuel's tiny fingers and toes, sitting up with Stella during late-night feedings, changing diapers without complaint. As Samuel grew from baby to toddler, the ranch prospered. Vincent hired a few ranch hands to help with the increasing work, and Stella found herself managing not just a household but a small community. She cooked meals for the hands, tended a large garden, continued teaching the neighbor children, and somehow found time to be a loving wife and mother. When Samuel was 3, a daughter arrived, a tiny dark-haired girl they named Rose. And 2 years after that, another son whom they named Daniel. The house that Vincent's parents had built with dreams of a large family was finally filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing. The years passed in a blur of busy, happy days. The children grew strong and healthy, learning to ride almost as soon as they could walk, helping with age-appropriate tasks around the ranch. Samuel showed a talent for working with cattle, while Rose had her mother's love of books and learning. Daniel was still young, but he showed signs of having his father's steady, thoughtful nature. Stella's relationship with the town continued to improve over the years. She had proven herself through her actions and her dedication to the community. She helped organize church socials, tended to sick neighbors, taught Sunday school. Her accent, which had once been a source of mockery and rejection, became simply a part of who she was, no more remarkable than the color of her hair or eyes. There were still occasional moments when someone new to town would react poorly to her northern speech, but those moments became rarer over time. And when they did happen, there was always someone ready to defend her, to point out that Stella Rourke was a valued member of the community regardless of where she had been born. Vincent's love for Stella never wavered. Even after years of marriage, after the daily grind of work and child-rearing, he still looked at her with the same devotion he had shown that first day when he told her voice was the most beautiful sound he knew. He still brought her wildflowers. He still made time for them to sit on the porch together in the evenings, watching the sunset and talking about their day. And Stella loved him more with each passing year, if such a thing was possible. She loved the man he was and the father he had become. She loved his strength and his gentleness, his humor and his wisdom. She loved the life they had built together, against all odds. One evening, when they had been married nearly 15 years, they sat together on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Samuel, now a young man of 14, was teaching 10-year-old Rose to rope a fence post, while 8-year-old Daniel attempted to mimic their actions with his own small rope. The sun was setting in brilliant shades of orange and pink, painting the familiar Virginia landscape in golden light. "Do you ever think about that day we met?" Vincent asked, his arm around Stella's shoulders. "I think about it all the time," Stella said. "I was at the lowest point of my life, and then you appeared like some kind of miracle." "I was just a cowboy riding home," Vincent said with a smile. "You were so much more than that," Stella said. "You were the first person who looked past my accent and saw me. You were the person who told me my voice was beautiful when everyone else treated it like something shameful. You changed my life, Vincent." "We changed each other's lives," Vincent corrected gently. "I was lonely before you came, Stella. I didn't even realize how lonely until I met you and understood what I had been missing. You brought light and love and laughter into my world. You gave me a family. You gave me everything." Stella leaned her head against his shoulder, watching their children and feeling a profound sense of gratitude. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day, when I told you people mocked my accent?" "I said your voice was the most beautiful sound I knew," Vincent said. "And I meant it then, and I mean it now. I could listen to you talk for hours and never get tired of it." "I love you," Stella said softly. "I love you so much it sometimes overwhelms me." "I love you too," Vincent said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days after that." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower and the stars begin to emerge. Samuel called out that he was taking his siblings to see the new calf in the barn, and the 3 children ran off together, laughing. Vincent and Stella remained on the porch, content in each other's company. Stella thought back to that frightened, desperate girl who had arrived in Williamsburg 16 years earlier, scorned and rejected for something as arbitrary as the way she spoke. She thought about how close she had come to giving up, to believing that she would never find a place where she belonged. And then she thought about the life she had now, the family she had built with Vincent, the community that had eventually accepted her, the happiness that filled her days. Life had not always been easy. There had been struggles and hardships, years when the cattle prices were low or when drought threatened their livelihood. There had been illnesses and accidents, moments of fear and worry. But through it all, she and Vincent had faced everything together, their love growing stronger with each challenge overcome. As the last light faded from the sky and the first evening stars appeared, Vincent stood and offered Stella his hand. "Come on, Mrs. Rourke. Let's go check on those children of ours and then have some time just for us." Stella took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. "That sounds perfect." They walked hand in hand across the yard toward the barn, where they could hear the children's excited voices as they admired the new calf. The ranch was quiet in the gathering darkness, peaceful and prosperous. This was home, this was family, this was love. Years later, when Stella was an old woman with silver in her hair and grown children with families of their own, she would sometimes sit on that same porch and remember the journey that had brought her here. She would think about the girl she had been, afraid and alone, and about the incredible stroke of fortune that had led her to cry by a fence where a kind cowboy would find her. She would think about Vincent, her partner for life, who had loved her from almost the first moment and had never stopped. who had seen beauty where others saw only difference, who had given her a home when she had nowhere to go and a family when she had none. And she would think about the power of a single act of kindness, of a single moment of connection between two lonely people, and how that moment had blossomed into a lifetime of love. But that was all still to come. On this particular evening, Stella and Vincent were still young and strong, their children still small, their love still in its prime. They reached the barn and stepped inside to find Samuel holding Daniel up, so he could pet the wobbly-legged calf, while Rose peppered them with questions about how soon the calf would be able to run with the herd. Vincent caught Stella's eye over the children's heads and smiled, that same warm, loving smile that still made her heart flutter after all these years. She smiled back, feeling blessed beyond measure. This was everything she had never dared to hope for. This was more than she had ever dreamed. And it had all started with a cowboy who heard her speak and told her that her voice, her much maligned northern accent, was the most beautiful sound he knew. Stella had found her home, not despite who she was, but because of who she was. And she had found it in the arms of a man who loved her completely, accent and all. As they stood together in the barn watching their children, surrounded by the life they had built together, Stella knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the person she was meant to be with. The future stretched out before them, full of promise and possibility. There would be more children to raise, more challenges to face, more years to spend together. But Stella was not afraid. With Vincent by her side, she could face anything. And with love as their foundation, they would build a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. The wind picked up outside, carrying the scent of hay and cattle and the Virginia earth that had become so dear to her. Vincent's hand found hers in the dim light of the barn, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. And Stella knew with absolute certainty that this was happiness. This was love. This was home.